It's really a great pleasure to be able to thoroughly read these 4 papers and while enjoying the logic and the empirical findings, coming up with some questions, and I'm going to talk first a little bit about what I get from these papers, and then raise those questions for the authors to respond. These 4 papers, I think, are very interesting in terms of their quite different methodologies. Professor Wang's paper is a very detailed account of how the national political economy got into this current trouble. And he uses the strategic triangle to analyze the US, China, Japan relations. So we find the strategic triangle. I mean, we find the strategic triangle everywhere. And in this case, Japan is raised to be a major player in the strategic triangle. So we find this analytical framework in Professor Holmes' paper. This is very interesting because when I read his paper, I said to myself, "This is Lenin. This is Lenin. The capitalism is the highest stage of imperialism is the highest stage of Lenin." The reason for that is because 37 years ago, I wrote my master's thesis on Leninism. and I'm so glad that he said that he read that, and I think it is well within it. So it's kind of a Marxist analysis, that is to put the Asian disorder in the context of the development of global capitalism. There's a grand theoretical framework there. In Professor Wu's paper, again, probably I'm getting even more excited because I'm right now very much into this history and international relations field. So it's historical analogy and historical comparison. And Professor Dittmer's paper, after a very detailed account of the development of Southeast Asia, he obviously uses strategic triangle, and it's more than one. So there's an Asian triangle and there's an international triangle. So 4 different papers with wide-ranging methodologies. In the first paper, Professor Wang talked about whether we really have moved into disorder. And he mentioned 2 criteria for giving a judgment on that question. First one is if order is stability, then probably we are moving into some certain degree of instability. And that's probably because of China's expansion is challenging the existing order. But that is not the major emphasis. The major emphasis is if order is considered to be the liberal order, is the liberal order undermined? And because the emphasis is on this one, so the United States or Trump has become the major culprit, not China. Because China is in the game that this paper does not dwell that much on, because that's in the security realm. The outcome, what is the outcome of this, he called it moderate phase transition. He said that even though we may have some fluctuations, Asia will be comparatively better than other regions. I would say that he is the most optimistic among probably all authors on this. Okay. And in his paper, he deals with the two realms, the security realm and the economic realm. So my question for his paper would be, first one, I think the definition of stability has been bifurcated. Namely, probably you have to make a decision on whether you really think that stability is order or liberal orders, the maintenance of liberal order is stability. And you cannot have two definitions and go on talking about these two as separate things. That's the first one. And the second one is, even though you think security is not your primary concern, but since you have raised security as one part of the definition of order, then my question would be, what do you think is the connection between the economic realm and the security realm? My specific question is, does the United States think that the security realm is subordinated to the economic realm? Or the US considers the two realms to be of equal importance? Or the US thinks that the security realm is still more important than the economic realm? The reason I'm asking this is I find different factions in the Trump administration. The people in the DoD, they probably think security is more important. So supporting the allies is more important. So you don't find faults with your allies, Japan and so on and so forth, even though they may be taking advantage of your economy. But then on the other hand, other people like Ross seem to be thinking that, these people are mercantilist, economic nationalist. They think that China is a target because that country has accumulated the largest amount of foreign trade surplus with the United States. But Japan is doing the same thing. Germany is doing the same thing. So United States should deal with those countries in terms of their degree of taking advantage of us. So this, the defense cost plus 50%, right? We just mentioned that. That is a calculation completely based on mercantilism and economic nationalism. My question is, I know these two factions are probably fighting for dominance, but what is indeed the American strategy? And I know Sam would say that Trump doesn't have a strategy, he has tweets. Okay, so for this paper, for Professor Hume's paper, and it is a very detailed account of how global capitalism has evolved into its current disorder. Basically, it reads very much like Leninist analysis of the problems of capitalism. Namely, capitalism has its own internal contradictions, expressed in terms of falling rate of profitability. So capital needs to go out to extend its life. In the time of Lenin, it is through the conquest of colonies by the European capitalist countries. In the time of our age, it is through the spread of capital by the United States through various means. And the US promote capitalism through two mechanisms. The first one is globalization, and the second one is democratization. And by having these two mechanisms, the whole world is opening up its market for the US capital. And then the US companies will be able to produce products in those countries with low manufacturing costs because their wage is low, and then the products will be sold back to the United States, and the US will pay them dollars. And since dollars are the instrument, global instrument of payment, those countries would be happy to receive the dollars, accumulate them, and then invest them back by procuring US bonds. So you're having this circle that sustains global capitalism. So the original problem of the contradictions of capitalism in developed world, namely rising wages, trade unions, etc., have been exported. And then the cycle can be sustained. Now, that's very interesting. My question would be, do you really think that the United States has been promoting democratization for the purpose of sustaining capitalism? Could it be possible that you have a lot of good-willed people, probably some in this room, who are doing this simply for its own sake? And inadvertently, probably, that opens up the market. And the other question really is, how can democracy opens up the markets of authoritarian countries? I know there are empirical studies on this, but I think it would require further explanation. How can promoting democracy be good to capitalism? You mentioned that if an authoritarian regime is overthrown, then the young democratic government would need to get into the world capitalist logic in order to have economic performance so that this nascent democratic regime will be able to keep in power. Yes, everyone wants to have legitimacy, everyone wants to have economic development, but is opening up to global capitalism the only way of achieving that? So that's the question. The third paper by Professor Wu Guoguang, I love it. I love it. Because I use the term 合纵连, just like you. And I perceive China, I don't know whether this is in the mind of the Chinese leaders. Probably it is, because it is in the mind of you and me. And probably for anyone who is quite familiar with the Chinese history, cannot help but comparing the situation. Because the Qing was the first dynasty that really unified China. Anyway, this 合纵连连, I think, yes, you have the vertical collaboration or horizontal collaboration. Vertical collaboration is joining all those countries threatened by Qing to form a united front against Qing. And horizontal collaboration with Qing to have bilateral relations with each of them and to separate them. Okay, my question is, in your diagram, United States is Qi. That's very interesting. Well, yes, Qi is in the eastern part of China, and United States is also to the east of China. But they are, geographically speaking, quite different. The other thing is, in the Warring States period, 战国时期, you do have Su Qing 挂六国相印, Su Qing acting as the prime ministers of the 6 countries. So there was indeed a vertical coalition. But then in the case of today's Asia, you have the hub and spoke system of the United States. So it's not a vertical collaboration versus horizontal collaboration. It's two systems of horizontal alliances. It's China versus Korea, China versus Japan, so on and so forth. On the other hand, it's United States relation with Korea, with Japan. And we don't have a Su Qing yet. We don't have a Lianpen, a vertical coalition yet. So that's the difference. And also I'm wondering if you are going to use historical analogy, why not use the early Qing situation? Because in early Qing, you have Qing controlling mainland China, obviously, and you have Tokugawa Japan, which is Japan today. You have Chosen in Korea, and you have Ming Zheng, Koxinga in Taiwan, and you have Annan and other countries in Southeast Asia. Wouldn't that be more comparable to today's situation than the warring state map? Yeah, so I love this, and we can have a lot of talk on this. I think it's very fascinating. Finally, on this paper, I'm wondering, sometimes we can use historical analogy, historical comparison to let us see the corners that if we concentrate on current situation, we will not be able to see. On the other hand, we may also be blinded and biased to, constrained by the historical patterns. That's something we have to overcome. And about the outcome, you mentioned that probably there will be no conquest, because obviously, today is not the warring states, with the exception of Taiwan. And I noticed that in your comparative diagrams, Taiwan's position is like the Han. And I don't know if that's correct, but the order of those states being swallowed by Qing seems to be Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan. So Han will be the first one to be swallowed, and Han seems to be the weakest one. So for Taiwan, it's not a big comfort. Okay, the final paper is Lower's paper. I think it's very interesting. It provides a detailed account of the development of Southeast Asia and its relation with the major powers in the world. And I'm particularly impressed by the way you talked about why there is one road. One belt is for the land, right? One road is the Maritime Silk Road. Yeah. And you say that it's to compensate for China's territorial claim in South China Sea. If that's the case, then this, I don't know whether China has succeeded in reducing the fear and anxiety among Southeast Asian countries by having this as a compensation. Because in all the other three papers, the authors talked about the cause of disorder. I'm wondering, what would you think is the cause of disorder? After all, you summoned us together to talk about the disorder. So what is disorder in Southeast Asia? Is it the territorial claim by China? So that's a question for you. And theoretically, you mentioned there are two triangles. And very important, interesting thing is that you think ASEAN can invoke the two triangles. If it is a matter of investment or foreign policy, then it can invoke the Asian triangle, and namely by having Japan as a counterbalance against China. However, if it is a security-oriented, then because Japan is not a big player there, then the ASEAN can invoke the international triangle and have the United States to help ASEAN. My question is, does ASEAN have the capacity, the ability to choose the triangle to invoke? Could it be possible, for example, the United States has military presence in Southeast, in the China Sea, South China Sea, but it may cause such a big conflict with China that maybe some of the Southeast Asian countries would not want to see. So can Southeast Asian countries move into this or that triangle and exit from this or that triangle freely? Could it be possible that it will be trapped in one of them? Could it be possible that big players, once invoked, would stay and behave in ways that would threaten the interests of ASEAN? And finally, you mentioned in your paper that it is possible that Southeast Asia is not under cross pressure, but is neglected by the United States. And that would be a problem. And as far as I know, Trump is not particularly interested in Southeast Asia. So if we have one of the major powers not conflicting with the other one, but simply withdrawing from that, like Trump is saying, I'm not interested in Syria. Let's pull our troops out. If Trump is thinking that, Southeast Asia is not his priority, what would the triangle look like? What would a triangle with the absence of one actor, can that triangle function? So I'm wondering, probably Southeast Asia is in a difficult situation. It doesn't want too strong presence from either of the two powers. However, it still wants great attention on this region. So it's too high level of attention, probably not good. Too low level of attention, not good. They're very picky. They want a moderate, medium level of attention. Is that the case? So these are my questions throughout this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.